If you want to be amazing at something, you need to find the people who are doing those things and either figure out how to be friends with them or pay for coaching from them if you want to be at their level. And we did that with 7-figure flipping. We did that with you and NEPQ.
We have Lindsay Arko. So Lindsay is the director of sales for Blackjack Real Estate, projected to do $1.6 million this year.
I just started by implementing KPIs. I wasn't even sure in the beginning what the right KPIs were for a business. So I would test myself, like how many calls can I reasonably make in this amount of time and how many offers should I be making? And actually, it made a difference. We saw an improvement in our numbers.
And so I love that you brought that up.
Welcome to the Zeroed In Podcast. I'm your host, John Lallande, a seasoned real estate investment expert and former Marine recon sniper. This podcast is designed for those seeking effective strategies to increase revenue growth through strategic hiring, leadership, and effective tracking. Our focus here is clear and direct. We provide actionable insights from successful founders and growth experts. Whether you're establishing a new business or aiming to scale an existing one, our episodes offer the essential advice you need for practical business growth. Lock and load, zero in, and get ready to scale.
Welcome to the Zeroed In Podcast. Today, I'm extremely excited. We have Lindsay Arko. So Lindsay is the director of sales for Blackjack Real Estate. I met Lindsay through Adam Whitney. Actually, we met through 7-figure flipping before that. She helped me out with some creative stuff. And so now Lindsay is the director of sales for a real estate wholesaling company projected to do $1.6 million this year. And they did over $1 million last year in revenue in the Florida market. So Lindsay is an absolute savage. She's an expert in sales. She's an expert in sales management and growing revenue for wholesale companies. So Lindsay, I'm super excited about this. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So walk me through, were you always the sales expert? I know, you came into the program but before you were doing creative finance. So were you the acquisitions manager? Like, how'd you get started in real estate?
I got started in real estate because I didn't want to be held captive by my W-2 job anymore. I was working for a very large CPA firm, auditing, and they owned my soul. And I needed to find a way out. I wanted more than anything just to be a present parent. And I found that real estate was probably my vehicle to be able to raise my children the way that I wanted and have time to do that, but then also give me the freedom financially to be able to just own my future.
Yeah. So that was you're auditing for a CPA firm. That's a lot different than sales, right? So
yeah. And not a good match for my personality at all.
Yeah, not at all. So how did you make the transition at first?
At first, it just happened. I was listening to Bigger Pockets. And actually, I read a book by Jay Scott. And, he said, this is how you flip a house. And here's how you estimate your costs. And I read it and I thought, well, we could do this. And so literally posted a post on Facebook that said, we want to flip a house. If you know somebody who has one, let us know. And somebody said, oh, I know somebody. And it was that easy. And it's never been that easy ever since, by the way.
And always your first deal is always, for some reason, really easy. Your first flip. I know for ours was too. So what lessons did you learn? You obviously, you did that by yourself with, I think, some partners for a while, right?
Yeah, my brother and I actually started together. And so I had the operations management, and sales background, and he was a contractor by trade. So between the two of us, we had all the skills. The first couple houses that we flipped, we did everything minus maybe some roofs and siding. And we quickly found out that was not something that we wanted to do. The manual labor wasn't my thing. So we wanted to grow and scale, weren't really sure how. And that's really what led me to 7-figure flipping, where I met you guys.
And then you met Adam. What lessons did you learn from flipping houses that, if somebody's starting, you would say, hey, be careful of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, I think a couple really important things is that you need to analyze a lot of deals to really have a good understanding of what the numbers are and what you should be paying for a house, and then stick to those numbers. I think when you're making a ton of offers and you're getting beat out, you start to edge up your offers a little bit, and you can get into so much trouble so quickly. So be conservative with your numbers, but at the same time, just make a ton of offers. You should be looking at a ton of deals. You should be analyzing a ton of deals. And if you're spending the time to do that, then you have to make the offer, because you're never going to get a deal if you don't make the offer.
100%. It's easy to get a little bit of hopium. And shoot, we do it on the acquisition side too, and you're getting beat up enough. We see our reps. I've been guilty of it. Like, you want a deal so bad that you just start inching your numbers up a little bit more and more until eventually, you're locking up deals that don't work. Downsides with flipping, they hurt a lot more when they don't work than with wholesaling, and you have to cancel a contract. So one of the things that I love about Lindsay came on sometime early in I think it was 23, right? Or was it in 22 that you came on? So early 23, and you adapted the NEPQ process very well. So you practiced it and you had it down quickly, right? So walk us through, what do you feel like you did that allowed you to develop those skills in such a short period of time? And when I mean a short period of time, like, you had the process down within 2 months and it really transformed your sales, right? So what did you do that allowed you to learn so quickly?
I think that probably the most important thing that I did was, besides learn the script, but practicing it, continuously practicing it. That means role playing it with friends, family, my kids. And then after that, going back, applying it, and then listening to myself. Because so many times you'll get off a phone call with a seller and you'll be like, I knocked that out of the park. I did awesome. And then I would sit there and listen, and I'd check off all the boxes of, did I ask this question? Did I follow the process? And I would find so many things that I missed. More important, what I found was that because I was learning, I wasn't really listening. And I actually got a lot of answers to questions that I didn't even remember hearing. And so that was really, I think, what moved me forward faster in the process. The other thing, too, is that one thing I've always known about myself, and I think this was instilled in me as a young child, was that if you want to be amazing at something, like really amazing, you need to find the people who are doing those things and either figure out how to be friends with them or pay for coaching from them if you want to be at their level. And I've done that. We did that with 7-figure flipping. We did that with you and NEPQ, because I want to be the best. So whatever you told me to do, I just did because I wanted to be the best, and I wasn't going to stop until I was.
And you say you learned that as a young child. Where do you think that came from? That was instilled in you to just get around the right people, pay for education and listen. Where did that come from?
Oh, it came from my parents.
They were the same way?
Yeah. And they always were, really understanding that maybe I wasn't going to follow the most cookie cutter path. And so whatever it was that we as children were interested in doing, they helped us carve out like the pathway to get there. So whether it was sports or academics, didn't matter. Like, put yourself in the right room.
I love that. So you mentioned one of the biggest challenges for you, and this is something like, if you're struggling in sales and you're just learning a new process, it's one of the most difficult parts. Lindsay mentioned she's learning a new process, but she's not listening, right? And I always compare sales when you're learning a new process to jumping out of an airplane. The first time you do it, you've got tunnel vision, right? You're just like, I'm trying to make sure I'm doing everything right, but I'm thinking like 1,000,000 miles an hour because I don't want to mess anything up. And then when you finally land on the ground and they ask you, hey, what was the views like? You have no idea, because you were just so focused on what you were doing, especially when you're learning the process, right? And then as you get better, you start learning how to listen. So what would you tell somebody that, they need to make it work and they're trying to learn the sales process and they're trying to learn how to listen at the same time? Like, how do you get better at that? How do you shorten that learning gap?
Well, the first thing is to break down the script.
Okay.
Because I thought, and you told me I couldn't do this, but I tried it anyway, just memorize the entire script, right? And if you do that, then I'll just hit the ground running and be able to go. But that's not what happened. I got really messed up and I didn't know where I was in the sales process. So the first thing is just take it one piece at a time and become really proficient at it, and then move on to the second. I already had a sales process that I followed. I wasn't happy with the results I was getting, but instead of trying to replace it right away, I just should have implemented piece by piece. And if I could start all over again, that's what I would do. And that's actually how I train new reps now, is I have them just perfect that first, let's say, connecting phase before they can move on to the next one.
So what were you not happy about with your previous sales process? Like, what were you using and what did you not like about it?
I was using like a variation of like a John Martinez style script. And it had worked actually really well for a long time, 6 years it did. Yeah. But what I found probably in spring of 23 was that seller would pick up the phone, and the first thing that they would say is, it's 3 beds, 2 baths, this many square feet, and I just replaced the roof and I want a price. And I couldn't build rapport, and there's just no way after you talk about condition. So naturally I would go into condition, right? Because that's where they wanted to go. Yeah. But then I was backed into a corner, and all they wanted was a price from me, and I couldn't get out of it. And then the other thing that happened was that, if you go back 6 years ago, not everybody was using some sources like pay-per-leads, where these people have so many people calling them. I've had sellers say, you're the 30th person that's called me today. Yeah. So I'm now battling that, where they're frustrated, they're irritated, and, that's really, really hard to be able to combat.
Yeah. And that was similar for me, which made me get into sales training. Before I had used other people's scripts. And to be honest, in 2020, 2021, even towards 22, like, you didn't need to be that good at sales. And I talk about that a lot on this podcast. You could get away with just going through the condition of the property, their time frame. And some people were teaching that, like, oh, this is your sales process. You get the condition, you get the time frame, you figure out why they want to sell, and then you give them an offer, right?
Time, motivation. Yeah,
exactly. That's it, right? Those, just hit those little buckets. And the reality is, if it was that easy, we could just have a bunch of virtual assistants, which even people were doing. They were having people from the Philippines because it was that easy back then. And so you probably dealt with something similar to me when the market started to change. It started to become more difficult, right, to talk to sellers. And as SMS and cold calling, those started getting restricted. Now people are just filling out forms online, and everybody's fighting over the same leads. So the only one that wins is the one that gets the best sales process. And I realized that it was similar for me that made me decide, okay, I need to invest in my skills, because everybody has access to the same leads at this point. The only person that's going to win is the one that knows how to talk to these sellers and get through to them. So I love that you also said you're teaching your salespeople now how to break apart the script. But now, before we get into training them, let's talk about like identifying good salespeople, because you got thrown into a business where you inherited salespeople, right? Mm-hmm. And as we all know, if you've ever been in that position where you become a leader, the first thing that happens is people want to test you, right? They're like, who is this person that's in charge of me? You're not my boss. You're not my dad. You can't tell me what to do. And so walk me through, like, how did you go through kind of turning around the sales team when you got into Blackjack?
Yeah, when I first got there, the person that had been there before me had been there for almost 5 years, and was a seasoned salesperson who'd done a great job for the company over the time she was there. But she wasn't really receptive to using any PQ, and there wasn't any like KPIs or accountability in place at that point. There had been over the years, but not at that point. And so I found that with somebody who's been around that long, I was willing to work with and give a longer, curve for them to make an adjustment, because they have to make some serious change, and be patient with that. So I just started by implementing KPIs, and I wasn't even sure in the beginning what the right KPIs were for a business. So you have to start somewhere, right? Yeah. So I would test myself, like, how many calls can I reasonably make in this amount of time, and how many offers should I be making? And so I used myself to identify what I thought those were, and I rolled them out. And first it was like, we're going to attempt to hit this. And then it was, these are the requirements to get there. And even though initially there was a different sales process, there's still stages or steps you should be going through, right? Yeah. So requiring that first. And actually it made a difference. And we saw an improvement in our numbers. And we had also split tested. I ran NEPQ. She ran the old method. NEPQ outperformed.
Yeah. So
I had clear data as to why we were making this shift. And eventually it worked out that it wasn't something that person, as successful as she was, she didn't want to make that change and she didn't subscribe or believe in that goal and what we were doing. And so I needed to hire additional reps to fill the position. And now, if you don't believe, if you don't want those same results, if you don't have our core values, if you're not willing to put in the work, then it's just not somebody we'd hire or keep.
Right. So, and the reason I wanted to ask you that is a lot of you that might be listening are maybe not getting thrown into a company where you need to start implementing some change, but you are the owner or you're the sales manager and your company needs to change and you know it, right? Mm-hmm. But you know that anytime that you implement change in your business, you're going to have turnover. You can't implement something in your business, a big change, right? It'd be very difficult to implement change without turnover. And it's funny, I even heard a story from a guy speaking on stage that it was something small for him. He wanted his contractors to upload their receipts from lunch because he was paying for it. And just something that small had people quitting because they're like, oh, they're going all corporate for us, right? But what Lindsay said, which is really good, is she gave them data. So she went and tested, right? So she didn't just say, hey, you're going to do this because I said so, right? Because that doesn't usually go over well, especially with salespeople with big egos. But you gave your team data. You said, I am going to first see if this is possible. Because if you as the owner or you as the sales manager can't do it, and you're supposed to be the expert, and then you expect someone else to go do it, they're not even going to think that it's possible, right? So you need to show them what's possible first, right? And then from there, give them data. This is going to help you. So we are going to start implementing KPIs and we're going to hold you accountable to those KPIs. But that's not for me. It's not for the company. This is going to help you make more money, right? And so I love that you brought that up. You didn't just go fling a bunch of new rules. A lot of people are guilty that are in masterminds. They go and hear something on stage, right? And they're like, we got to do that. We got to go back and we got to implement all of this. And they don't have any data to even back it up that's going to work for them. And so the salespeople are very resistant to it. So I love that you did that. And obviously, eventually, you had to turn over because some people, even when you give them the data, you show them that it works, they're just so used to doing things a certain way that you're going to lose people. That's part of the business. So your job is then to go get new people. So once you shifted focus to, I need to get better reps, right? What are you looking for in those new reps?
Well, we use Culture Index, which is, it gives us a little bit more information about their personality and it predicts how they are going to perform. It doesn't measure intelligence and it doesn't measure passion. So those are things that obviously I'm trying to figure out during the interview process. But when we post an ad, we will put a link on there to our culture index just to see if they fit the profiles that we've determined work best within our organization. If somebody's a match for that, then we would move them to a first interview, which is more like a 10-minute conversation just to see if they should move on to their first interview. But what I'm looking for is somebody who has demonstrated and can show me that they're a performer and that they are truly passionate and committed to improving themselves. I need somebody who's very driven. So often there's a say-do gap. I meet people who say they want to make a lot of money, who say they want to be at acquisitions, who say they want to work at Blackjack. They say they're going to put in the time and the effort, and then I never see that happen. So during that process, I'm testing them every single step of the way to see if they're going to close that gap.
When you say testing them, what are you doing? How are you testing people?
I'm asking them to give me examples of previous performance. So for example, one of the things that I would say is if you, in our company to be successful, it's not unusual for somebody to work 7 days a week and oftentimes late into the evening. If you needed to do that to close a deal and you had a very busy day and you didn't get all your calls done and you didn't run as many appointments as you needed to, how would you make up for that? And so if they tell me, well, I would work the next day, or I would work Saturday and Sunday to make up for that, that would let me know that that would be something that they were very serious about. But most people won't say that to you. They'll say that they'll start again the next day. They'd be okay with not hitting their KPIs for that day. They'd be okay with not making up for what they didn't hit the previous day.
And what type of personality? You mentioned culture index. So obviously you can ask people questions all day about, I'm this type of person, I'm that type of person, but what are you looking for in the culture index? And can you explain what are the differences between the different personalities?
Yeah, so I'm looking for somebody that has a high B, which means that they enjoy the social interaction. They enjoy working with people, but they also have a high A. Because if they only have one, let's just say they have a very high B, they love talking and working with people, but their A is very low, that means that they don't have a lot of autonomy. And so they care more about being friends with people, but they can't necessarily close because they can't move it forward. If somebody is a very high A, and I'm a very high A, but my B is substantially lower, it has to be high enough that I don't want to hide in a cubicle and not speak to anybody all day. Otherwise, I'm never going to get a seller on the phone and get them to move through the process.
Interesting. So a lot of people, they think, oh, well, I'm going to find the person that can talk the most and loves people, and they're going to be the best at sales. But you're saying that doesn't always work. You're saying that they're too talkative. They might have what it takes to get people to open up, but when it comes to actually closing and staying disciplined on the schedule, those aren't the right people. So you're looking a little bit of both. And
right. If you have a really high B, oftentimes you love talking to people. You sell based on personality, right? So it means your results go like this. When you vibe with somebody and the conversation's great, you can close it. But when it's not, you can't.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And then I've also seen, people that have a really high S or C on the disc, or, C or D. So basically what we're talking about, if you guys can picture a, D, I, S, and C, or A, B, C, and D, depending on, I guess, how you're looking at it. You can look up culture index, you can look up disc, there's predictive index, but they all follow the same patterns. So how autonomous are you? Are you more autonomous, or do you need a lot of guidance? Or your I, how much do you love people? Your C is more of your well, actually, if we're talking about disc, it'll be your S next, right? Which is your patience level, right? Are you very do you have to think a lot before you make decisions? And then you've got your C, which is how analytical are you? And then it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing if you go and you look at culture index, it's just A, B, C, D. And so what we've noticed with salespeople, and Lindsay and I have spoken about this before throughout the program, is we've both had reps that were very analytical. And the problem with them is they want to know everything before they go into a call, right? They're high S or high C, where they go everything off of feeling and they want to, analyze everything. They get stuck in analysis paralysis, right, with sales. And there's ways that you can overcome that. I don't think that just because you have a certain personality type, you can never be good at sales. You certainly can. You can learn the skills, but you're going to have to try harder because you're going to want to learn everything about that person before you even call them. Where in the reality, if you know everything about them, you're going to have a very difficult time having a sales call because there's no questions to ask. There's no curiosity, right? So I love that.
I actually struggled with that, John, in the beginning. I would prep for an appointment for a half hour. I would do so much in-depth research into the comps, the area, every little thing. And because I am high logic, what happened is that I couldn't be curious and I couldn't ask questions because I had so many assumptions that I knew everything already. It made it very difficult, and it gave me a hard time building rapport because I couldn't ask enough questions. Now, and when I run an appointment, I need to know the address, and I'd love to know the bed and bath count, only because in Florida, it's never accurate as far as what's on the auditor's site. Other than that, I don't want to know anything because that makes me very curious, which then allows me to dig really deep with the seller.
So when I was prior just running acquisitions and I had virtual assistants doing lead management, what really helped me is I would not listen to their call. at all. And I would look at their notes, but I wouldn't listen to the call. So when I used to listen to calls, I knew what type of seller they were, and I knew kind of and I just went in and it messed me up so much. So I would much rather just look at some cliff notes, right? This is why they might be looking to sell, and this is their time frame, whatever, and just go from there. The less I know, the better, because I'm able to be more curious. So other than what we've already kind of covered. So tell me about NEPQ. Obviously, you were using some John Martinez. You had a sales process before. What were some of the big changes that you noticed once you started getting the sales process down, you learned how to listen? I mean, what were some of the big changes that you saw that really helped you?
The absolute biggest change, and I don't even know I realized it was happening at the time, but when I realized it was, people would say to me, I have such angry people, tough, combative conversations. It's so difficult. People are hanging up on me. And I actually had to think about that for a second because I couldn't remember the last time that had happened to me. And that's been the biggest change, because we use techniques, status frames, and the way we ask questions and our tone, pace, really change everything about the conversation. So the exhaustion that I used to feel at the end of a day running a lot of appointments, I don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
That fear of like, oh gosh, if I ask this, it's going to go wrong. It's not going to land right. You just don't have those conversations anymore. And so you feel great. Your conversations feel good, and you are able to dig so much deeper and ask sometimes some really tough questions of people without it blowing up in your face.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of like a question that you used to ask that maybe would get met with resistance, or somebody would come back and yell at you or hang up, where, you learned an NEPQ process or an NEPQ question that you got a completely different response?
Yeah. The most simple one is when I just changed from saying, is there a mortgage that we would need to pay off prior to close, and how much is left on that?
Yeah.
Right?
What were you saying?
None of your business. Do I have to tell you that? Like, that's what they would say. And so when I first started using NEPQ, we changed it, and we would say, I see here that it looks like there's a mortgage of about $125,000. Is that still accurate?
Yep.
Nobody has ever questioned it, not on one phone call. Now, in role play, sometimes people will question it, but never on the phone.
Yeah.
It just goes so smoothly.
Yeah, because people are surprised that it works so well. Another one is, the most common thing is, why are you looking to sell that property? Right?
Oh,
what would people say when you ask them, so why are you looking to sell the property? I'm sure you asked that, right? That's part of the previous training. What would people typically say? Why
do you care?
Yeah, exactly.
I know what you're trying to do to me. I know you're just trying to manipulate the conversation. I mean, people get so defensive.
So why do you think they do that? I mean, why do you think sellers, are getting so defensive when you ask them why they're looking to sell?
Because they feel like, and I've actually had somebody say this to me, you're looking for my weakness so that you can exploit it. Or you're trying to, and then the next thing they would say is, my house isn't distressed. I don't have to sell. You're just going to lowball me, and I'm not giving my house away. So it just increased sales resistance so much that it was hard to recover at that point. And that's in the very beginning of the phone call. And you still have a lot to talk about, but you can't get them to calm down.
Yeah. And so what kind of questions do you ask now to maybe get some of that information, and they don't, go up in flames the second you ask it?
Yeah. And instead, I just say something like, when you were looking online and you saw our ad, what stood out to you that actually made you want to reach out and talk to me?
Yep.
And then they'll say, something more like, I want to sell quickly. I'm relocating. I need to move in 60 days. They'll give an indication. And at that point, I can ask some more questions or figure out, what the real motivation is. But they're not shutting down at that point. Most of the time, they actually think I'm just trying to figure out how I got their information. And that's helpful information, but I just want to bring them back to the point in which they reached out, and whatever was the pain point that made them actually go online, so I can remind them of that moment and bring that front and center.
So you've picked up on this, and like I said in the beginning, you picked up on it very quick. and now you've got your own techniques that you're using, you're adding to it, but you're also training people, and the people that work on your sales team, your sales reps, are going through it. They're picking up quick as well. So walk me through how you're training them, and also add on to that, why is training your sales team like so important? Should you do it if you've only got one rep? Like, what do you think about that?
I think it's most important that that's where you spend your time as a sales manager, as a business owner. Because acquisitions or sales is the lifeblood of your business. It's what drives revenue for the entire company. So you have to set aside time, because what you put into it, you will get back out with it. I am very self-directed. So you could say to me, here's the script, Lindsay, I want you to memorize it. And I would do that. But most people aren't that. And most people need to see a level of results before they're willing to continuously commit and engage. But even then, you slip into bad habits. They come off script. Even people who do this script very well will fall off. And so if they continuously role play, analyze, listen to their calls, and we grade them. They grade themselves. I grade them as well, to make sure we're on the same page. If somebody's results slip, I can look at it between our KPIs and our quality scores that we do from the call audits, and I can identify very quickly what the problem is.
What is a quality score? Walk us through that, because I know you've made some modifications. We do that in NEPQ, but what exactly are you doing now?
So what we do is we identify one call per week, so one sales appointment per week, and typically that's like a 45-minute call where the rep will re-listen to the call, and I will listen to the call, and we have a quality scorecard. So the quality scorecard goes over each of the 7 steps of the sales process and the key points of each one. So for example, in the very beginning with the connecting phase, we want to ensure that they use the appropriate tone, which would be a curious tone, and that their pace, in sales, we have a tendency when somebody answers the phone to just start talking very fast. Yep. And then somebody can't listen to us. So making sure that tone and pace is great. And then also using the appropriate language. So for example, if I call somebody and they pick up, I identify myself as, "Hi, it's just Lindsay from Blackjack Real Estate." And I say words like that they may possibly be looking to move away from their house on Main Street. So using words that lower sales resistance so that you can continue on through the call. Each step in the sales process has those, like I just mentioned, or specific questions that are key parts to having success and actually converting to a contract. So there's points for each area of the scorecard, and then there's also negative points. So if they jump into condition of the property in the very beginning of the conversation, we would have to deduct some points. Or if they, make an offer too early, or they didn't, use the finance parking lot, which is a really important part of our process, then I would take away points for that as well.
I love how you broke that down. A lot of people don't really know what makes up a good sales rep. And what I love about NEPQ is they've broken it down, right? So you've got tonality. Tonality is a huge part of it. You got your verbal pacing. So not just saying, "Hey, it's just John over with XYZ company. I'm just giving you a call about this property on 123 Main Street. And I was just curious if you wanted to hear an offer on the property." Like, just no breaths, right? People don't have enough time to internalize what you're saying. And someone that, might be more like of a natural at sales will just do those things. They'll have little pauses. Their inflection will change in their voice. They'll use different types of tonality, right? But what we want to do is we want to take somebody that maybe they're not a natural, they're not great, and how can we train them to become an absolute savage at sales? And you've done a really good job of training your current team, teaching them tonality, how to ask the right questions, when to ask the right questions, when to pause, right? Because those things are so important, and we sometimes do it naturally once you get a level of unconscious competence, but training it to somebody else is a whole nother ballgame. Training salespeople is not as easy as, is not always as easy as just being good at sales, right? Because you could be good and it can be really difficult to train salespeople. What else are you doing now for your team to train them that you think maybe other people aren't doing?
I talk about something a lot with our team, call it relentless exactness.
What does that mean?
That means to be relentless in practicing and applying scripting. Because if you have this script down really well and a seller throws you a curveball, or you get on a call and you get nervous. I still get nervous sometimes, right? Sure. You're going to default back to what you know. And if what you know is that script, because you have studied it relentlessly, you're still going to get through the call. You're still going to be able to deliver results. Yeah. And so every day we have a huddle. It's from 10 to 10:15 a.m. We go through KPI review. We talk about marching orders for the day, and we go through drills. And it's some piece of the script, some piece that maybe I've seen us struggle with, and we'll go over there's a couple different talk tracks and scenarios, and until it feels good, it's fluid, and they apply it. We do more training other times during the week that's longer, but just doing those little drills every single day and tweaking. And when I say relentless exactness, I mean making sure that those pauses are there, making sure that the tone is there, because you can get away with asking a lot of things if you say it in the right way.
Yep.
Even if it's not perfect in what you actually said.
And what do you do if somebody, comes on? They are really bought into their way of doing things now. Obviously you've already had a turnover where you guys are full in on this sales process. Maybe they're just not seeing it for whatever reason. How would you go about saying, I wouldn't say convincing them, but how would you handle that?
If I don't feel somebody's 100% bought and committed to making a change or going to apply themselves to learning what we do, then I don't hire them.
Yeah.
When I'm hiring, I almost do everything I can to dissuade them from continuing on. I tell them it's going to be really hard, probably the hardest job you've ever had. And I'm going to change the way you speak, the way you talk, the speed in which you talk, and I'm going to hold you relentlessly accountable to our KPIs and our standards. And they have to convince me that they are willing to do that.
Yeah.
And they will convince you by other things that they say. I've had somebody interview with me, and they've worked in several different companies, and there were several different scripts, but they still knew best. I know that person's just not going to be a fit for us, and I don't want to waste their time, and I don't want to waste ours either. So I feel like there's a better chance because of that screening we do on the front end that we're going to get people more likely to make that change. But after somebody comes in and they get comfortable, maybe they don't follow the process exactly, and they get lucky and they sign a contract. And the next thing you know, they're skipping problem awareness and solution awareness, and they're going straight for a close. And then I can tell because we've moved from 45-minute call to a 10-minute call with an offer, right? But contracts start dipping down. So it's very easy because we are very good at tracking information, our KPIs, that I can demonstrate what I already know to be true based on those numbers. Well, you had 5 appointments today and you were on the phone for 20 minutes total. How could you have possibly gone through the entire script and done it well? And the answer is they can't.
And this is one of the things I love about your ability just in sales management is the right things to look at, right? Because I know that, that wasn't even something that we covered in the group. You just knew, okay, so I'm looking at this person going on 5 appointments. They're doing 5 phone appointments, and their total talk time is 20 minutes. Did they really have enough time to go through a sales process and find motivation? Probably not. And what happens a lot of times, if you don't know your data, you don't know your numbers, you don't know what you're supposed to be hitting and what average is, then at the end of the month, you don't have revenue and you don't know why. And that's terrifying. And honestly, I think that's the reason that most people quit. Most people get out of the business and they quit because they don't know their numbers. And if you don't know your numbers and you don't know what problem to fix, I mean, it's frightening. It's like when your car breaks down, you know nothing about cars, and you're stuck in the middle of the road, right? You're like, I don't know what to even do here. I just know it's not working, right? So you have to go call someone that's going to run tests. They know what to look for. And don't be that in your own business. Like, you can go hire a mechanic for your car, but don't be that in your own business where you don't know, what's going on and you don't know how to fix a process if it's broken. And you were able to diagnose that quickly because you knew your numbers. So, right. And I love how you're teaching people every day the same exact thing, right? The importance of knowing your data, the importance of knowing where to look when there's a hole in your system. And that's what a sales manager should do at the end of the day. They don't necessarily need to be the best closers. They need to understand how to look at data, how to hold people accountable, which is huge, which, we've covered a couple of times, holding your team accountable when they start slipping. And not just, pointing fingers and telling them what to do. So all really good stuff. Lindsay, where can people, if they want to learn more about, let's say, your process, how you're teaching people now, like where can people learn more about what you're doing?
You can find me on Instagram. It's just L for Lindsay and then ARKO 102. Or on Facebook, it's just at Lindsay Arko.
And last, what's your best piece of advice for someone that is struggling right now with closing deals? Maybe they're on the edge of giving up. What would you tell them?
I would say go back and listen to yourself and ask yourself, did I do everything I could to get this person to sign and to get a contract? And by that, did I follow a process, a structured process, even if it isn't our process? Did I follow each step and ask each question? Did I actually identify what the problem is? I've worked with so many salespeople, and at the end of a call, I've asked them, what was the seller's problem? And they don't actually know because they gathered a lot of information and they made a bunch of assumptions and then they made an offer, but they couldn't solve a problem that they didn't know they had. So go dig in and figure out what the problem is so that you can actually help the person solve it.
I love that. That's so good. Well, Lindsay, this was awesome. This was extremely helpful. I think that your ability to articulate, sales and how to be a good sales leader is incredible. So I know that everybody's got a lot of value. Go follow her on Instagram. She's going to be doing some incredible stuff coming up. She's already doing some big stuff, but I know you and Adam have some big stuff coming up too. So thanks so much for coming on. This is Zeroed In Podcast signing off.